quite a few months removed now from the release of the GTA Trilogy Definitive Edition. It took me 5 days to finish GTA 3, but Vice City took me about 2 months. But I've finally done it. I've finally 100% of the game. So, it's review time. Now before we get started, this won't be a full-on rant. Sorry, not into doing that.
No! This is not how this was supposed to go!
Second, if you have seen my GTA 3 review, I already said a lot of stuff which also applies to this game's definitive edition, so I won't be spending a ton of time on this. And also, just like that video, this will have 2 parts, a review of how good or bad of a remaster the definitive edition is, and a review of the full game itself. So let's jump into this. Let's start off by talking about how this game looks graphically. Does this look like a 2021 video game? Hell no. Not even close. It looks like exactly what it is. A remaster of the game from the PS2 era that had a rather cartoony look. Now, do I think their goal back in 2002 was to make the game look cartoony? Absolutely not. I'm sure they were doing the best that they could for the time. Should we have gotten remakes that totally modernized the character models and environment? Honestly, yes, that would have been nice, and believe me, I'm right there with you in saying I'd prefer that. But nonetheless, they chose to go with a remaster that reflects the same cartoony look that the games ended up with back in the day. And in my opinion, I think they succeeded in some places, while they could have done a lot better in other places. Let's start off by talking about the environment, the general game world. I think the world can look beautiful a lot of the time, and just like GTA 3, I think this is less of the upscale textures and more of the lighting engine. The game can look absolutely gorgeous at specific times of the day, or when you are in a very neon place with a lot of color, which there's a lot of that in this game. The much more vibrant color palette of this game combined with the new lighting just makes places such as Ocean Beach at night or the Malibu Club just look pretty as shit. The setting in general just puts it over GTA 3 because there's so much more interesting stuff visually going on when you've got beaches, a strip of buildings with neon signs, a suburbia, and palm trees all around. The reflections on cars are a nice thing we can have with updated graphics too. Pretty much all the vehicles look really nice, mainly because they all look like they've just been polished in the reflections you see on them. The world generally looks pretty good. Same opinion I had about GTA 3, but I do think that this game's color palette really helps push it above GTA 3's definitive edition. Something I feel needs mentioning is the weather. The rain has been patched across the board in the trilogy since I started this game, but from even the old version of the game, Vice City had much better rain than GTA 3. I never felt it hindered my ability to see in the game unlike GTA 3, but it was still clearly a filter. But it was much more transparent and seemingly the raindrops were far less big, but it has since been patched and it is even less bad now. It's still obviously a filter, which I'm not happy about, but at least it isn't GTA 3 pre-patch rain. Also, a little note I have to say I find cool is how the leaves on palm trees move with the wind in the definitive edition. Trees themselves kinda bobbed around in the original, but I don't think their leaves really moved around. It's a little thing, but it's nice to see some little things when it's pretty common knowledge the bulk of the work on this game was in AI upscaling textures. The world itself outside looks good, but in some places it doesn't exactly look great. Like the beach, for example, or the level of detail on buildings from a distance, or even close up in some cases. Now, I'm pretty sure the level of detail from far has always been bad in the definitive edition, but from what I've noticed, it actually got worse, even close up in the late November, early December patch, whenever it was. This really drags down flight gameplay in specific, as half the time your surroundings look like melted ice cream. I think the interiors are probably the best looking places in the game, as they all look pretty good. Overall, I'm going to give it a B-. Pretty good upgrade, with level of detail from a distance being the one big drawback for me. I know some say it looks worse than the original, but like, I just don't agree personally. The definitive edition definitely is the more appealing one to my eyes personally. The environment seems to be the one thing that these definitive editions seem to do the best job on, unlike this next aspect. Character models. As with GTA 3, these aren't necessarily great. I do believe Tommy, much like Claude, is the best looking model in the game, but I think he looks a little off, or at least he isn't really all that emotive in cutscenes now. He's fine with a normal face, but when trying to show any emotion, it doesn't really reflect in this new model. Other character models are just kinda okay. Ken Rosenberg looks like a baby in some cutscenes. Lance's face looks kinda off, like the proportions of his facial features just seem strange. It makes his face look so small. The less important to the story, the less detailed the models are. Like, they're upscaled, but it's clear less attention is given to someone like Umberto Robina than someone like Tommy. NPCs seem like they were just smoothed up. Now, for me personally, the character models aren't so bad to the level where I want to shit on them every day. They could be a lot better, but I can live with them. Overall, I'd give them a C- rating. When looking at it from the perspective they wanted to keep the cartoony look, it's somewhat passable. But even then, some of these character models really look too damn cartoony. I don't think GTA 3's models look nearly as much Saturday morning cartoon as a few of these, so it's definitely lacking compared to that one. Now on to something else these games were very criticized for: bugs and stability. I experienced only a handful of bugs in my time in this game. My missions never once bugged out. A few times I had cars randomly get stuck in the ground, whether it was mine or NPCs. The level of detail which I already brought up fits into this category also. Lance's model and gameplay in the Copland mission is literally just his model exactly as it was in the old game, and the radio, at least on Xbox, has multiple bugs. One is it'll cut off radio host dialogue a few seconds early, and another is that the radio keeps going when paused. I never experienced any real game-breaking bugs in my time here except for the level of detail on buildings. Now, my experience could be totally different from others, but out of my personal experience, I just didn't have very many huge issues. In terms of stability, I crashed considerably less times than I did in GTA 3, only crashing maybe 3 times in my entire 2 days of playtime. And keep in mind, I'm on an Xbox One S. Now, in terms of frame rate, I did have frame rate issues in this game on several occasions. Mainly when in the mall, my game just refused to have a stable frame rate in there every single time I was in there. Overall, in terms of bugs and stability, my experience personally was pretty positive. Now, it is worth mentioning half of my playthrough occurred after multiple major patches, so the game as I was playing it was totally different than if I had played it back in November. I'm going to give it, based on my own personal experience, a B, although this varies from person to person. But if my experience on an Xbox One S was this smooth, it really makes me wonder how much worse more powerful platforms can have it. Finally, on to the final aspect, which really verges on remake territory as it is changing up something about the original: gameplay changes. As with GTA 3, this game includes a weapon wheel, a radio wheel, actual GPS guidance for waypoints, or just waypoints in general, and mission checkpoints.
Not exactly.
Which again is a total lie, as it's just a mission restart feature. The criticisms I have with many of these, although they are all welcome changes, is that they all seem like they are only half of what they should have been. The weapon wheel, in my opinion, should let you have multiple of the same weapon type like in GTA 5. The radio wheel should show you what song is currently playing and who it's by. And the checkpoint system should actually have checkpoints on certain longer missions. They also said that these have GTA 5 targeting, which I don't really know how accurate that actually is. I don't think it feels very much like GTA 5, and with auto aim feels more like GTA 4, but a little bit more clanky. Overall, these are all welcome changes, and although they don't quite work like you'd think they would, I'm going to give this section a B, as they do all add to the game, specifically mission restart. The worst part of these older games was failing a mission, having to make your way around the map getting weapons and armor, and then back to the mission itself. But now it's just one button press away. So now it's time to average up our scores. I gave world graphics a B-, character models a C-, bugs and stability a B, and gameplay changes a B. Using numerical scores relative to the letter grades I assigned for each aspect, I have calculated that GTA Vice City Definitive Edition, in terms of how good or bad of a remaster it is based off of my personal experience with it, and my personal assessment of how good or bad it does each aspect, gets an overall grade of B-. beating out GTA 3, which I gave a C. It surpasses GTA 3 Definitive Edition in every aspect except for character models, which I think GTA 3 did better. But that was based off of GTA 3's state back just a week or two after launch and before any patches, and it could have gotten better since then. Maybe Vice City was on par with GTA 3 at that point in time. I don't know. Regardless, for what it is, I was satisfied with this game's Definitive Edition. Now, before you go getting mad at me about how mods are better, allow November me to give my perspective on the behind the scenes drama, but this time with Vice City gameplay over it instead of GTA 3. One last thing I have to say is no matter how good or how bad of a state these remasters are in now, or in a year, it doesn't excuse them taking down mods and threatening to sue modders. That is an absolutely shitty thing to do. And yes, some of those mods were better than what we got here. I'm not going to tell you to go out and purchase these because truly, they don't deserve the money because of that alone. Even if these were Red Dead Redemption 2 level remakes, Rockstar is quickly becoming a parody of itself since Dan Houser and Laszlo left. It's really concerning for the future of the company. But regardless, I was still hyped for this. I pre-ordered it and I'm enjoying the hell out of them. And I realize how that isn't a good thing because it enables them to continue doing this. But I'm still not going to lie to you and say I do believe, at least in the case of the one game I've finished so far, that they did a good job improving it graphically and making gameplay improvements. And not everyone can use mods, because some require hefty PC specs, and it's just much cheaper for me to buy a $60 game for a console I already own than to upgrade my PC to a level where it could run those mods well. Again, doesn't excuse what they did to modders, but I'm just saying I'm glad we have a way to experience a newer version of these on new consoles. If you're still here, thanks for sticking around. On to part 2 of the review. Now on to part 2 of this review, the review of the game itself. Much like GTA 3, this was a game I had hardly played. I just could never get past the damn RC helicopter mission. But now that I played it, I see what I was missing. The fact that this game that was originally supposed to be an add-on for GTA 3 turned into such a massive game of its own is very impressive. I kind of wonder if the game would have been half of what it turned out to be if it was just a GTA 3 add-on, or if a lot of content and depth was added after they decided to turn it into its own title. I don't know, but aren't we lucky it became its own title? I'm going to talk about 3 aspects here: story, world building, and gameplay. We'll open up the review this time by talking about the story. Vice City isn't a very long story, but it does so much more than GTA 3 did in half the amount of time. Vice City brought us our first true GTA protagonist, because while Claude was basically just a self-insert, Tommy's a full-fledged character, with voice acting, thoughts, and feelings of his own. He was involved with the Liberty City Mafia back in the day, but after being set up and put in prison, the same person who doomed him there sends him down to take care of expanding the Mafia's business into the South, particularly in Vice City. The deal goes wrong and Tommy decides eventually, after completing his objective, not to help Sonny, but to help himself and rise up to be the ultimate power in Vice City. But it doesn't stop with Tommy. There are actually other characters in this game, not just objective-giving talking heads. The 2 main candidates I can think of here are Lance Vance and Sonny Forelli. Lance Vance is the second lead and Tommy's partner in his journey to get the cocaine from the Bosch deal back, and ultimately to rise to the top of Vice City. Lance's brother died in the botched deal and he is out to get revenge, causing him to cross paths with Tommy. The 2 succeed in their goal to get the man responsible for the botched deal, and they take over his business. Lance, however, as time goes on, feels like he is getting less and less of a fair deal. This leads to his ultimate betrayal to Tommy in the climax of the game's story. Now, these characters aren't exactly GTA 4, 5, or Red Dead levels of written. There wasn't much going on in terms of character writing in these earlier titles, but these 2 were the first truly well-written characters with a little bit of depth in this series, I feel. Now on to the last example, Sonny Forelli. He isn't exactly a character with much depth, but a major step up from Catalina as far as being an antagonist goes. Sonny frequently checks in on Tommy and speaks down on him, and he threatens him once he catches wind of Tommy's betrayal. Unlike Catalina, Sonny is frequently in this game's story, even if it is mostly just in phone calls between missions. And when he finally shows up, it feels like a big deal. The dynamic between characters is well done too, from Tommy reluctant to work with Lance at the start of the game while Lance is insistent upon it and keeps popping up and annoying Tommy, to them becoming somewhat friends, to Tommy being just as annoyed at Sonny as we are, to us finding out about why Tommy hates Sonny so much, and seeing there was much more there than we thought, and this was all about giving the finger to the man who cost him 15 years. The story is just one big story of going from a goon to the very top while paying a very heavy homage to a lot of 80s crime movies and just going all out with the 80s tropes. I mean, all of this plays out on the beaches of Miami in the 1980s. Can it get any more 80s than that? I'm pretty sure this game is the main reason so many of us who never got to see the 80s love the era so much. It's a story of crime, it's a story of betrayal, it's a story of rising to the top. It's so simple, but it just works. Vice City would be such a perfect game to be adapted into a film if it wasn't already based off of several films. So as far as story and characters go, it's not the most outstanding work compared to future titles, but it's not meant to be some complex story. It's a simple, fun 80s story. I give it a B. Now let's talk about world building. I'm mainly going to be talking about how well of a job it does making us believe we are actually in the 1980s. The map is just perfect for the story. Miami has to be the most popular setting for any and all things 1980s. It's just such an amazing space to exist in, whether it be the beaches with its endless chain of beach houses, the downtown, or even the suburban areas for both the high class or immigrants and poor communities. The outside world itself is a very interesting space, but being forced to stay outside doesn't feel realistic and it's just boring. GTA 5.
Let me in. Let me in.
That's where the many interiors you can go into come in. You can hit the nightlife in the clubs, grab a bite to eat at pizza places, pretend to be late to a flight at the airport, or go shopping at the best of the interiors, the mall. These all provide fun locations to go to and, well, do not so legal things, and just provide a place for the NPCs to feel less out of place. Now on to how the game looks. Just about the whole game has a vibrant color palette with lots of neon lights that just makes it feel so 1980s. I can't think of a single part of the map that isn't visually entertaining. NPCs have era-appropriate styles, and while I feel a lot of the time NPCs are just aimlessly walking around, often in areas they probably shouldn't be in, some are well placed and are convincing to making this world feel more realistic. NPCs with shopping bags can be seen all around downtown, skaters can be seen on the Ocean Beach Strip, NPCs with swimwear can be seen walking around or laying down on the beach. A lot of this stuff may not sound that special for today's standards, but honestly, the attention to detail for a 2002 game with 9 months of development is pretty impressive. Now on to the final and definitely biggest part of the world building of Vice City, possibly what this game is most well known for, the radio. Vice City's radio is worthy of the hype, no doubt about it. It has the biggest hits of every genre of music from the 1980s. I won't lie and tell you that I listened to all the stations in this game. I mostly spent my time on V-Rock and Emotion while occasionally switching to Flash, FM, or Wave, and very rarely touching the rest of them. But if there's one thing that pretty much everyone loves about the 80s, it's the music. And for a lot of the past couple of generations, it is very much thanks to this game. From songs that just sound pure 80s like Out of Touch, I Ran, Obsession, Sister Christian, or I Just Died in Your Arms, to glam metal bands like Motley Crue and Twisted Sister, to thrash giants Megadeth, Anthrax, and Slayer, the whole game's radio is full of era-defining music. The only thing I can say that it is a shame is that the Scarface music from GTA 3 isn't here, as the game has many not so subtle references to Scarface. But I'm not deducting points for that, it's just something I think would have been nice. But GTA Radio is more than just music. Let's talk about the talk stations. This is something that GTA never fails with. But unlike GTA 3 where there was only one talk show in the station and it was Chatterbox, here we have Vice City Public Radio where you can get all the political satire you could dream of, or K-Chat with the dumb blonde sounding Amy, not pronouncing that last name, who often somehow gets guests dumber than her. They provide good world building because you get to hear from other people who genuinely live in this world and learn about what projects they're working on, whether it's an election campaign or an upcoming tour. And along with the radio world building, we have perhaps one of the best things Rockstar did for establishing this game's setting, Love Fist. I'm not gonna lie, I really don't like either of their songs in this game, but I can appreciate Rockstar creating their own 80s hair metal band that they went out of their way to make 2 songs that sound era and genre appropriate and integrated them into both K-Chat with an interview with Jez Torrent and the story itself with Tommy meeting and helping them out. They could have just as easily advertised them on the radio and had people mention them and that's it, but they went so much further than that. For general world building, I'm giving Vice City an A+. The map is fantastic and it has a lot of variety to it. It isn't just all city blocks, it isn't just all beaches, it's got a little bit of everything. The game is visually very interesting all the time, especially with the new graphics and lighting. I mean, the early night lighting with that pink and purplish sky is just... And hell, if I'm being honest, the radio alone could give this game an A for world building. But the fact that it works so well on all other fronts is just spectacular. Now on to the final section of the review, gameplay. Let's start off with mission gameplay, then dive a little more into the rest of the gameplay later. Mission gameplay is way better than GTA 3. Because unlike that game, there isn't really any missions that felt like they didn't give me proper instructions on how to go about finishing them. None of them were all that tedious, they were pretty much all straightforward, where the most challenging part would be in combat heavy missions, knowing when and where enemies are coming from, especially in missions where enemies have high power weapons that can melt you in seconds. The missions also had decent variety. Not every mission would just go from point A to point B and shoot a bunch of bad guys and mission complete. GTA 4. There were missions where you had to destroy specific things, whether it be boats, glass windows, or a whole construction site. There were shootout missions, there were missions where you had to follow people undetected, there were chase missions, beat up missions, retrieval missions. There's a good variety here from mission to mission to never really have missions feeling repetitive. There isn't a terribly large amount of missions, the game only has about 35 missions, but on top of that you also have property management. I feel like Vice City Walks of GTA 5's story and online could run when it comes to businesses. Tommy takes over and whips out of commission businesses into shape. These are required to do the final mission and add to make the actual number of missions absolutely required to finish the game somewhere around 50. Some of these missions can even be done after completion of the business. Like the ice cream, for example, which, you know, isn't actually ice cream if you didn't know. But don't tell anybody that, okay? Now let's talk free roam gameplay. Much like GTA 3, there are plenty of things to do that aren't required for the story. There's taxi missions, which can be done as much as you want at any point throughout the game. That's possibly the best of these because doing fares while vibing to the radio and taking in the environment is just next level. It's how I got my Born in the 80s trophy. But beyond that, there's also firefighter missions, paramedic missions, and vigilante missions, which can be launched from several different vehicles. The most fun definitely being the tank, because come on, what's more satisfying than cars crashing right into you and blowing up? Ice cream truck missions, which is really just distributing less than legal product, but don't tell anybody like I said. And the one I am so angry that is not available after you fully complete it is the Pizza Boy missions. Like, come on, why won't you let me deliver pizzas anymore? Most of these grant you with a permanent boost to Tommy, whether it be extra health, armor, infinite sprint, or fire immunity, making them pretty much necessary early on in the game. On top of that, there's also tons of rampages, which has Tommy making enemies of several gangs, which still attack you in free roam like in GTA 3, although none are as annoying as the Mafia in that game. Really, these ones are more of minor inconveniences, as the worst they usually do is just pull you out of your car. Stunt jumps, which are kind of finicky, races, chopper checkpoints, stadium missions, which can only be accessed at a certain time of night, payphone hits, and other miscellaneous activities. Collectibles are also back with 100 hidden packages around the map for you to collect, once again granting you an award for every 10 packages earned at a certain safe houses. Although these ones for me are personally underwhelming as they give me mainly weapons I don't like to have on me. No SMGs, no ARs. They grant fun weapons like the RPG, flamethrower, chainsaw, and minigun, sure. But what I loved about getting the packages in GTA 3 is I could stock up on weapons I use practically every mission just by simply stepping into a drop at my safe house. You also have several sets of import-export to collect, which is harder than GTA 3's due to the amount of vehicles this game has compared to GTA 3, and that game I knew pretty much every vehicle by name. When I tried this game's list, I didn't know half their names. This game has like twice as much to do after completion compared to GTA 3. Now I'm going to lazily tack on my opinions on certain gameplay mechanics here. Driving in this game is really smooth and easy and is honestly probably the best driving in the trilogy. Combat is a little bit annoying as you can't move while crouched and there's no cover ability, so crouching is your best bet to avoid enemy fire. And no swimming in a setting largely based around water and the beaches is rather unfortunate. For gameplay, I'm going to be giving Vice City a B. So now that brings us to the end of this review, months in the making. Honestly, I wasn't sure I was ever going to get this one out. Hell, I'm recording this commentary a month after I finished the script. But here we are. GTA Vice City is an amazing game. It took what worked about GTA 3 and elevated it to a whole other level. And the fact that this game was only released just 1 year after GTA 3 is genuinely mind-blowing. While GTA 3 was the first game to have the GTA formula as we know it, Vice City improved on that formula. Vice City brought us protagonists as we know them today, and radio as we know it today in the franchise. Those being two of the most important aspects to the series as a whole, and they began here. Now time to give Vice City a letter grade based off of an average of the grades I gave each aspect. I gave story a B, gameplay a B, and world building a B+, averaging up to a total grade of B+. Vice City was an experience much like GTA 3 that I'm looking forward to experiencing again after I finish San Andreas, which is my next review. I'm currently in San Fierro and San Andreas at the time of recording this commentary. I truly have no clue when I'll finish it or how long after it will take me to make the review, so basically, I'll see you when I see ya. I hope all two of you have made this to this point enjoyed. I know this review will probably have lost all relevancy since the DE has been out for 4 months now, so I doubt it'll do as well as my GTA 3 review, but thanks for sticking around if you have, and I'll see you later.